Welcome to Peace and Power Ukraine, a place to discuss all aspects of policy related to Ukraine. Ukraine sits at the crossroads of modern history, where freedom collides with totalitarianism and East meets West. All things are happening in Ukraine these days. It's exciting times. I'm excited to bring back a returning guest, and it's going to be a great conversation live from Kyiv. We have Stephen Moore. He's the founder of the Ukrainian Freedom Project and executive producer of A Faith Under Siege, a film that tells the stories of Ukrainian Christians who have suffered the worst that Putin can throw at them and overcome through faith. The movie inspired a series on Angel Studios. Stephen came to Ukraine on day 5 of the war after a lifetime in Republican politics, which included 7 years as a chief of staff in Congress. Today, he lives in Kyiv and spends all day, every day, pushing back on Russian disinformation, getting firsthand data-driven information about Ukraine to American opinion leaders and policymakers. It's great to have you back, Steve.
Always great to be with you, my friend.
Good. Well, we're going to get into a lot of great things today, but first, I really want a chance for our audience to understand what day 5 was like. Take us back to the beginning, and then we can trace some of all the way to the current day battles. But what
Sure.
took you to Ukraine on day 5 of the full-scale invasion back 3.5 years ago?
Yeah, almost 4. We're pushing 4
Yeah.
in February. But I have a lot of Ukrainian friends, and I'd spent a year here in 2018 and 2019, and then joined a artificial intelligence firm, an American firm that had like 500 Ukrainian employees. So I had all these Ukrainian friends, and I left my job on January 31st, 2022. And as you do in these times of transitions, you have a lot of reflective time, and you think, what are the really important things in life? Like, should I go skiing in the Alps or skiing in the Rockies?
Right.
And so I'm struggling with these weighty issues. And then my Ukrainian friends start telling me things like, they're bombing Kyiv. I don't know what to do. And so, this is my 5th war zone, 6 if you include Congress. And so I was in Iraq at the beginning of that war in 2003. So, I heard these people needing help, and I'm like, how much harder than Iraq could it be? So I jumped on a plane, flew into Bucharest, took a car to the Romanian border with Ukraine, and I got to tell you, the line to get into Ukraine on that day was a lot shorter than the line to get out of Ukraine. And so I some of my Ukrainian friends picked me up at the border, and we just started doing the work. At the time, we thought, like everyone else, that the Russians were going to roll through in 3 weeks, and everybody in Ukraine was going to be living under Russian rule. And so that was Putin's special 3-day military operation, which is on like something day, 1200 or something along those lines. And so, first we try to get people out of hotspots like Kyiv and Kharkiv. Then the international community, you might be surprised to learn, really failed miserably. International organizations are not all they're cracked up to be.
Right.
And so we just started getting food and medicine to the front, and places like Kyiv when it was surrounded on 3 sides by Russians, or Kharkiv when it was getting bombed constantly. So and then
You stayed.
I stayed. So yeah, let's just went into that. There's a lot to tell. Let's just stop it there.
Yeah. You've stayed. Ukrainian Freedom Project was birthed out of that, and it's been doing amazing work pushing back again on Russian disinformation. Just this week, you had a great op-ed in World, co-authored with a good friend, Paul Teller. Tell us about that piece. I was impressed about that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. And Paul is such a great leader in the conservative community. It was an honor to be able to co-author that piece with him. But here's what a lot of Americans don't know is that, everybody wonders, why did this war start? And Putin's got some nonsense about NATO expansion, and these are really Russians. I need to rescue them. And let me tell you, no one in Ukraine thinks they're Russian. Nobody wants Putin to rescue them. But what's happened is that the Russian birth rate has plummeted to a 200-year low, in part because of unrestricted abortion for decades. And at one time, only about a third of Russian pregnancies ended in a live birth. Two-thirds ended in abortion. Now it's almost one out of every three pregnancies end in abortion. But that has really done a number on the Russian birth rate. So Putin, you may have heard from the First Lady, Putin is kidnapping and trafficking Ukrainian children.
Yep.
And so why is he doing that? Because what he's doing is he's taking the people dying in Ukraine are not ethnic Russians. They're people from Bashkortostan, from people from Eastern Siberia, places that you and I have never heard from and will never see. And these people are not ethnic Russians, and he's sending them to fight and die in Ukraine. Meanwhile, he views Ukrainians as Russians, so he is kidnapping Ukrainian children to rebuild Russia's population. And so the Ukrainian government has identified about 19,000 children that they know have names and faces for that have been kidnapped. Meanwhile, the Russians say they have as many as 730,000 Ukrainian children. So it's a really messed up thing.
That's incredible. You're the first person to really draw that clear of a line. Most of our American friends have begun to understand this tragedy that is kidnapping, thousands and thousands of Ukrainian children, but maybe they didn't understand the why and understand, there's probably been a million, casualties on the Russian side, and they've got to replace those, but also they've had a birth dearth. And the most interesting part is that he views Ukrainians as Russians, so that's a worthy replacement.
Yeah, and for him, it's a great deal. You get rid of some undesirable ethnic minorities in Eastern Russia, and you pick up a bunch of people he views as Russian. So it's really about as dark as you can get.
Yeah. No matter where somebody stands on the question of abortion, you're just stating the facts of where they're at, and they need population. And some of these children are Russian speakers from areas that were more majority of a Russian language. So there's been this idea that, that makes them automatically Russian, but no one was asking for even the places on the border, and correct me if I'm wrong, like Kharkiv, that was understood to be very pro-Russian. As soon as the full-scale invasion happened and civilians are being indiscriminately killed, they quickly realized, we're not fans of Russia. This isn't, they're killing us left and right.
Well, and I'll give you an example from my personal life is that, my fiance, Anna, who you've met, she grew up 30 miles from the Russian border. So, and her mother did very well during the Soviet Union. And she was the head of a meat processing plant. And then she went on to make a life for herself as a small businesswoman, doing a family business, making food products for local grocery stores after the Soviet Union fell. So, and she had friends in Russia, both from the Soviet Union and from just the fact that they're 30 miles from the Russian border. And when the Russians invaded, her daughter, Anya's sister, called her mom and said, "Mom, the war started. The Russians are here. What do we do?" And her mom says, "These are Russians. They're not going to harm civilians. We're going to go to work." So they went to work. 2 hours later, they're running for their lives with the Russians shooting them in their backs. And, so as I like to say, Anya's mother was the last Ukrainian with any fondness for Russia. And, so there's the Ukrainian children and their children's children are going to hate Russia. It's just a fact.
Right. Well, you're doing a good job to dispel a lot of myths, and the Russian propaganda machine is very powerful. You laid out in a recent post called "Ukraine is Winning." You said the Ukraine Freedom Project polled Republican primary voters in mid-October and found that only 11% thought Ukraine is winning. Well, that's easy to understand. Conservative influencers like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have long parted ways with the truth and are filling conservative ecosphere with nonsense about Russia being a great power. So tell us about some of that myth busting you've been doing, and particularly with new polling out.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I've been to the Ukrainian front 50 times at least. I've been all around it. We send non-lethal aid to Ukrainian soldiers, things like Starlinks and generators and that sort of stuff. And I frequently talk most days with someone who's either at the front or have been back from the front. And what Americans are missing is, every time the Russians take like a roadside gas station in Ukraine, the media, just blows it up. It's like, oh my gosh, they've taken this village, they've taken this gas station, whatever it is, right? But what the media does not tell you is that there is an enormous number of Russian casualties to take these things. And let me give you an example. Just this year, the Russians have lost 400,000 soldiers. And they have taken an amount of land in Ukraine equal to about 37% of Palm Beach County, Florida, the president's county. So, think about it in terms of your county, right? They have not even taken enough land in Ukraine to fill a county in America. Yet they have lost 400,000 soldiers this year, and I think it's up to about 1.3 million for the entire war. So nobody talks about the amazing toll that this is taking on Russia. And there's a really, you're familiar with Operation Spiderweb, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Operation Spiderweb. The Ukrainians smuggled 117 kamikaze drones into Russia, parked them in trucks next to 5 different air bases in 5 different time zones across Russia, released them all at the same time, and destroyed $7 billion worth of Russian aircraft. They've taken out a third of the Black Sea Fleet, and they don't even have a navy. Russia's blown through like 2/3 of its sovereign wealth fund, and so nobody is reporting on just the beating that Russia is taking.
Yeah, when I saw this piece, I knew that I had to have you back on, because I've been wrestling with this question with other guests, and I've been asking people, is Ukraine winning? And maybe the better way to phrase it is Russia losing? Because to me, every day that Ukraine exists and there is free air to breathe in Ukraine is a loss for Putin and a defeat for his regime. And that's maybe the more important way to frame it. So I'm glad you can unpack that for us. And maybe it's just the difference of some people see the glass half full and others see it half empty.
Yeah. Listen, nobody's got a resounding victory going, but right. And I think that in the big picture, what you've got is Putin wants to take over Ukraine and the former countries of the Soviet Union, and so if he and again. What goes behind that number of 1.3 million soldiers is the death payments that he has to pay to the families, which are $116,000. So that's a lot of money, man. Right. That's a lot of oil they got to pump. Right. And if we can cut off their oil, then yeah.
That's right. I keep hearing he's not allowing his troops to go out and collect the dog tags of the dead Russian troops that are caught in difficult areas. He doesn't want to have to pay that because the economic pressure is ramping up. So let's get into that.
Yeah, totally.
You also wrote that Ukraine has taken out some 35% of Russian oil refining capacity, and Putin has burned through 2/3 of his national wealth fund to pay for this war. He does not have a blank check that's endless supply of money or oil that he's able to extract. It really is getting to be tough times for him.
Well, and here's what needs to happen is that they're sanctioned very heavily, particularly in the oil, but they're evading the sanctions very handily. Like they've got a ghost fleet. Someone, tell your viewers to Google Russian ghost fleet. And there's these about 1,000 ships that are like off the books and flying flags of different countries. And they go and they meet in the middle of the ocean with an Indian oil tanker and they offload Russian crude. And they do it, in evasion of the sanctions. And we know there's about 1,000 of them. We can identify several hundred of them. So it would make a statement to Vladimir Putin if a U.S. destroyer just pulled up next to one of these and said, hey, you guys shouldn't be here. We're taking you into the dock. and that would make a statement.
Yep. Back to your polling, as you've done education, particularly to Republican voters who have been most susceptible to a lot of this propaganda that's out there that the Russians really pay for, you've had success in helping them understand the successes that Ukraine is having.
Yeah.
So dig a little deeper for us on once you inform voters the perspectives, how it changes. Maybe voters,
Yeah.
just citizens, you know.
Well, yeah. So we poll Republican primary voters, and this is all we're a 501c3. You can go to my website at ukrainefreedomproject.org and see it, or you can subscribe to my Substack, which is Tales from World War III, Stephen Moore, StevenMoore.substack.com. And so you can see this stuff there. But what we do is we ask Republicans, do you favor or oppose additional military aid to Ukraine? And starting out, 47% of Republicans favor military aid to Ukraine. But when you tell them things like Russia is aiding Israel's enemies, and that Putin hosts regular summits of the Islamic extremist organizations who want to wipe Israel off the map, then that makes a difference, makes them more likely to support Ukraine. If they recognize that Vladimir Putin is not going to stop until someone makes him stop, until President Trump makes him stop, Vladimir Putin is not going to stop. That makes a difference. And but maybe a lot of Americans don't, that Putin has sent drones into European cities like Copenhagen, Munich, a lot of places in Poland, Estonia, Romania, and he's being more aggressive with the Europeans. When people learn about that, they want to support Ukraine and keep the war in Ukraine. So let's do that.
Let's dig into one of his chief proponents of Russian propaganda, bought and paid for by Russian sources, is Robert Amsterdam. And I know you've had some battles pushing back against it's come out this week that in addition to being a voice, that's a nice way to say it, on behalf of the Putin regime's goals, Amsterdam has also been on the payroll of Maduro's regime, and also fronting for the groups that are persecuting Christians in Nigeria. So all of that's really become clear this week. It's like a rogues gallery of amazing patrons, like Austin Powers, evil henchmen all around the table, and Robert Amsterdam. I think I'd like to hire all of you. Be hired by all of you.
Yeah.
What does that do for your work as you're pushing back on the misinformation? Because I think that would help our American voters to understand who it is that's the voice of the regime and speaking up for Putin's regime.
Robert Amsterdam, as you point out, is the attorney for supervillains, and so it's like out of a comic book. And he's never met a dictator he doesn't like. And Tucker Carlson has him on his show and pretends like he's gosh, you're struggling to keep Christians free, and it's not true at all. And so Tucker has that look. He's got that look. I'm listening, and Robert Amsterdam goes off. But Robert Amsterdam, will tell you that Ukraine is persecuting Christians, and it's just nonsense because I live here. It's not happening, quite literally not happening. But with every good propaganda, there's a kernel of truth. And the Russian Orthodox Church is a working arm of the Kremlin, and the Patriarch Kirill, the Russian patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, has said he's declared a holy war on Ukraine and the West. And Gary, I don't know where you go to church, but I'm guessing your pastor didn't declare a holy war on anyone last Sunday.
You got that right.
Yeah. So now there's a branch of the Russian Orthodox Church inside Ukraine, and they're doing things like helping the Russian military target artillery, preaching surrender. They are monitoring Ukrainian troop movements, and just all kinds of really nasty stuff that gets Ukrainian civilians killed. So So yes, these pastors and priests, when they do these things, are getting arrested. And there's so many of them doing these things that 85% of Ukrainians view that church as a national security threat. And the interesting thing is this church that's a Russian Orthodox church inside Ukraine. At one time, like 60 or 70% of Ukrainians used to attend this church, but has got increasingly pro-Russian, and the Russians were increasingly aggressive and towards Ukraine. It's like now down to 4%. So Robert Amsterdam is defending this so-called church that is killing Ukrainian civilians, or rather helping the Russian army kill Ukrainian civilians.
Right.
So yeah, Robert Amsterdam would be funny if it wasn't so tragic.
Right. Well, thank you for helping elucidate and illuminate. Let's say a little bit of truth there. I know you said you're sitting there in Kyiv tonight. I'm headed back in another week or so.
No way.
So I'm going to be joining you, but help our audience understand, what's going to be a normal night in Kyiv. You're 7 hours ahead, so it's not yet maybe time for the Russians to send glide bombs in yet, but give us a perspective on what tonight might look like for you, maybe in the worst case scenario. And, we're hoping and praying for not that, but we know that could be the case.
Well, and let me just tell your viewers that, Kyiv is a highly functioning city. I've had people in America ask me, can you get food in Kyiv? And, it's actually hard to get a bad meal in Kyiv.
True.
And so when I got to Kyiv, 3.5 years ago, it was surrounded on three sides by the Russians. I could walk to the front, and now you have to drive 10 hours to find a Russian soldier. So, American weapons, Ukrainian bravery have done a lot to drive the Russians out of here. But what happens still is that Putin uses Iranian-made drones. They're called Shahed drones because Putin is cooperating with Iran, and Russia and North Korea are also. China and North Korea are also in on the act, as well as hangers-on like Cuba and Venezuela. So all these countries are coming together, and they're working against Ukraine, and they're working against America, and they're working against Europe. And so what happens is these Iranian-made drones buzz by my window a lot of nights, man. And it sounds like there's a motorcycle in the sky. And you can hear it. It's like when my blood pressure goes up when I hear bzzz, and then when I hear it going over my head and it goes bzzz, it's like, oh, it's past me,
right?
And so then the blood pressure goes down. But yeah, there's. On some nights, Putin will send hundreds of these Iranian drones into Kyiv to kill families and children. And we have friends. You and I have a mutual friend, Mark Sergeyev.
Yes.
And as you know,
Mark. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Mark was chased out of his home of Melitopol by the Russians, and he and all his Christian friends congregated in this particular neighborhood and moved into this neighborhood. And Putin sent a drone in there and blew up their housing. So miraculously, no one died. But if you'll go there and you'll see it, mm-hmm. and it looks like there should be a lot of dead Christians. Right. But Steve,
our audience is going to wonder at this point, this many days into the fight, do you still go to the bomb shelter? Is it just you live with the risk? And everybody has to answer this question on their own. But how do you handle this?
Gary, if I went to the bomb shelter every time the alarms went off, I would get nothing done.
Right.
And so, I live in a house that has walls that are about 3 feet thick. And we live in a neighborhood where there's a ton of European embassies. So I'm kind of the opinion that Putin's not going to start World War III because he, took out France's embassy and killed,
right.
Half a dozen foreign service officers. So, so I feel listen, you know what they say is that the safest place you can be is wherever God wants you to be. And
Mm-hmm.
God has
Amen.
put me in a position to tell truth to other believers in the United States.
Yeah.
And God, and we have, our movie, A Faith Under Siege, has been on CBN, TBN, it's been on Newsmax, it's now, on Angel Studios. So, and I've got to put myself in harm's way to do that, to get that message out. And so, listen, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah,
and I have a lot of
powerful.
faith in God, man.
Mm-hmm.
So,
amen. Tell me about how Ukraine's going to survive this winter. We're in November, time of this recording, mid-ish November, and I hear about this regularly. And there's always these concerns, and hey, they're not going to be able to do it, and then. Last year they were blessed with a mild winter. You were blessed.
yeah.
But is there a pervasive sense of this could be different this year, and it's going to be more difficult in some new ways? Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Russians have really figured out some new tactics to take out some of the energy infrastructure here. So we have not had in the first year, like 2022, 2023, there was a lot of blackouts. We really haven't had that many blackouts since then. Now, we had a blackout earlier today, and I think it'll be a great sense of drama if my lights go out, but my computer stays on from the battery. So that'll be fun for us. But so it's getting worse. Now, that being said, the unsung heroes of this are the energy workers, the people that keep the lines open and keep the power stations repaired. And we get probably half and half electricity, no electricity. So you can warm up your house, you can charge your stuff, and everybody here has an EcoFlow, like these batteries that are about the size of a cooler you would take to a tailgate party at a football game. And so you can, it's rough, but it's not as bad as you might think. And if you're in a village, you got a stove, and so make no mistake, it's not fun at all.
Right.
But it's it's not as bad as you could think.
Yes. Well, I think that's important for people to understand that this war that Putin can't win on the ground. His army's moving at a snail's pace.
Literally.
Yeah, you can calculate.
Someone calculated it,
and that's as fast as they've been going. So the war that he can't win on the ground, he's taking to the air with these missile and drone strikes attacking energy infrastructure. Now, at the same time, Ukraine has gotten much better about attacking his energy infrastructure in terms of his oil and natural gas facilities, all his money-making apparatus, and it is having great effect. So that seems to be the balance that we're looking at. Is that about right, or is there more to the picture?
No, listen, this is a game of, can the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people stand up to what Putin's doing, particularly to civilians, and while Putin spends all his money on the war, and the Ukrainians take out his energy infrastructure, his ability to produce oil. That's, Russia is a gas station with an army. And, and that's it. When was the last time you went around your house? You got a beautiful house there. Have you ever picked up anything that said made in Russia? No, Russia doesn't make anything, man. And, so if you take out the gas station, the army withers. And that's what the Ukrainians are doing. And, I lived through the Biden administration here, and the war may be won by now if Joe Biden had let the Ukrainians use long-range weapons inside Russia. He wouldn't let them do that. So tens of thousands of Ukrainians that would be alive today are not alive because of Joe Biden's fear-forward foreign policy. And so now they're doing that. Now they're taking out this infrastructure, and it's working.
The only thing that I have made in Russia is this, for those that are watching the stream, this Russian officer's hat that I traded for in Moscow in 1992. I traded an old starter, athletic hat for that one. That's the only thing I've got here.
That's all you need. Yeah. That's all you need, man.
So as we wrap up today, Steve, I want you to give folks again your website and tell them how to follow you. But if there's one thing that we did not get to cover that we would be remiss and you just would hate yourself if you forgot to mention it, what might that be as we wrap up today?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think it's that, I think we touched on it, but, there is a global war. There is a global war. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea are all working together. Russia is a primary sponsor of Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and all the other little, Islamic extremist organizations that are causing, death and chaos in the Middle East. And, President Trump's focusing on Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is part of the problem.
Right.
And so that's, Venezuela and Russia are, they text each other a lot. Let's put it that way. So I think that's what Americans need to recognize is that, we are in a global war right now. And, and whether it gets hot or hotter, because there's shooting wars right now, on and off in Europe and the Middle East. And, and Xi Jinping has said he wants to go into Taiwan in 2027. And there's tens of thousands of North Korean soldiers in Russia to gain combat experience so they can invade South Korea. So they're not doing this for fun. They are training. And they're working together, and they're going to attack America, Europe, and all the good guys, Israel, and everyone else, all the good guys in the world. And, and Americans are scrolling Instagram. So, we need to wake up.
Yeah. If we're not careful, this is just prelude to World War III if we don't, handle this the right way. So again,
Totally.
Ukraine Freedom Project, and where can we follow you, Steve?
Stephen Moore on the appropriately enough, the Substack is named Tales from World War III. And you can find that at Stephen Moore, StevenMoore.substack.com. And I'd welcome everyone as a subscriber.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for your work, your courage. We'll continue to pray the best for you tonight.
You know what? I will tell you one more thing. Mm-hmm. You know what our poll shows is that support for Ukraine among America's Christians. If you attend church once a week between June and today, you are 22 points more likely to support Ukraine. And you know why that is? It's because of the work you and I do together, my friend.
Yeah.
So
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. We got to keep it up. And I'll see if I can find a moment to get some coffee with you on this next trip.
Love it. We'd look forward to that. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you for everyone listening to Peace and Power Ukraine. We'll see you back here next time for another great conversation.